Dear ladies and gentlemen, there is a silent force within each of us, a force that shapes our thoughts, our actions, and ultimately our destiny. Yet this same force, if left untrained, can slowly destroy us without us even realizing it. The mind is often described as our most powerful tool, but what most people never understand is that the same mind capable of building greatness is also capable of quietly destroying us from within, and it rarely happens in loud, obvious ways. Instead, the destruction is subtle, slow, and almost invisible because it takes place in the silent corners of our inner world. The mind does not attack with force, it attacks with whispers. It creates doubts that feel like truth, fears that feel like protection, and limitations that feel like reality. People assume their suffering comes from external problems, from other people, from lack of opportunities, from failures or disappointments. But in truth, the biggest battles are not outside. The greatest battles are fought within the boundaries of our own thoughts. The mind has the ability to invent stories that have no connection to the actual world. It pulls memories from the past, attaches meaning to them, and uses those memories to predict the future in negative ways. One painful moment becomes a lifelong belief. One rejection becomes I'm not enough. One failure becomes I should never try again. These thoughts start small, but they grow roots, and those roots spread into every area of your life. Without realizing it, people begin to live according to these inner stories. They stop exploring possibilities, stop taking risks, stop trusting themselves, all because the mind has convinced them that caution is safety, that staying small is protection, and that avoiding the unknown is wisdom. When the mind is untrained, it constantly works against our well-being. It exaggerates fears, creates imaginary threats, and focuses on the worst possible outcomes. It tells you that you can't even when you can. It tells you that something will go wrong even when nothing has happened. It turns minor challenges into mountains and turns temporary emotions into permanent identities. The real danger is not that the mind lies, but that it lies in a voice that sounds like your own. It becomes very difficult to question something that feels like it is coming from inside you. Most people never realize that their mind is not reporting the truth. It is projecting their conditioning. This untrained mind becomes a silent saboteur. It drains energy through overthinking, wears down confidence through self-criticism, and blocks growth through fear. It keeps you trapped in cycles of worry and hesitation. It convinces you to avoid discomfort, and in doing so, it prevents you from discovering your potential. It magnifies mistakes until they feel unbearable, and it minimizes progress until it feels meaningless. This constant internal friction creates a life filled with stress, confusion, and emotional fatigue. And all of this happens without any external enemy. The destruction is self-generated. What makes this so dangerous is that most people never realize it is happening. They assume their thoughts are simply how life is, instead of understanding that their mind is shaping a distorted version of reality. The mind becomes an automatic machine, running old programs that were created from childhood experiences, societal expectations, failures, and fears. And unless it is examined, these programs continue to run for decades, controlling behavior, decision making, and emotional responses. People end up living a life that is not truly theirs, but a life shaped by an unchallenged mind. When the mind is left to its own nature, unobserved, untrained, and uncontrolled, it creates emotional storms out of nothing. It reacts instead of responding. It panics instead of pausing. It judges instead of understanding. And because these reactions feel natural, individuals never question them. They simply assume the mind is helping them survive, when in truth, it is limiting their ability to live fully. This is how the mind destroys silently, by convincing you to be smaller than you are, by feeding fear disguised as wisdom, by making you believe that your thoughts are superior to your reality.
This inner destruction continues until one becomes aware, but until that awareness arises, the mind remains the hidden architect of suffering.
It shapes your world, you, your confidence, your emotional state, and your choices. It keeps replaying past mistakes, predicting future failures, and distracting you from the present moment. And because you don't see this clearly, you accept it as your identity. You think this is who you are, when in fact, it is only the unchecked activity of the mind. This is why the mind is considered the most dangerous enemy. It destroys quietly, invisibly, and convincingly. Most people move through life believing they are making conscious choices, but in reality, a large portion of their thoughts, behaviors, and reactions are nothing more than automatic patterns created by the mind. This unconscious way of living is one of the most powerful reasons why people feel stuck, dissatisfied, or disconnected from their true purpose. Instead of responding to life with clarity, they react from habit. Instead of choosing intentionally, they repeat yesterday's decisions. Instead of seeing the world as it is, they see it through the filter of their past conditioning. This creates a life that is lived on autopilot, mechanical, repetitive, and far removed from genuine awareness. When people are unconscious of their own thoughts, they do not question where those thoughts come from or why they arise. They assume that every emotion is justified, every fear is meaningful, and every worry is important, simply because it appears in the mind. But the mind produces thoughts the same way the lungs produce breath constantly, automatically, and often without direction. Most thoughts are not chosen, they are triggered. They come from old memories, hidden insecurities, social conditioning, childhood experiences, fears, and unresolved emotions. And when a person is unaware of this inner activity, these automatic thoughts take control of their life. Living unconsciously means repeating the same emotional reactions again and again, even when those reactions harm you. It means getting angry without understanding why, feeling anxious without a clear reason, or falling into sadness without knowing the cause. It means allowing external events to dictate your inner state. Someone's words, someone's behavior, traffic, delays, misunderstandings, even the smallest situations become triggers because the mind has never been trained to pause and observe. Instead, it reacts instantly, and the individual becomes a slave to that reaction. People who live unconsciously also tend to follow routines and beliefs that were given to them, not chosen by them. They inherit ideas from parents, teachers, society, culture, religion, and past experiences. These ideas settle deeply into the mind and begin shaping identity. A person may believe they are not capable, not worthy, not talented, or not important, not because any of these are true, but because somewhere in their early life a similar message was absorbed. Once it becomes part of the mind's programming, it functions quietly in the background, influencing every decision. Without awareness, the individual never realizes that they are living someone else's script, not their own. This unconscious living also creates a strong attachment to comfort and familiarity. The mind prefers what it already knows, even if what it knows is painful or limiting. It prefers routine over growth, predictability over transformation, and safety over possibility. So when an opportunity arises to step beyond the comfort zone, the mind quickly generates doubt, hesitation, and fear. The individual believes these thoughts are logical and convincing, unaware that they are simply automatic defense mechanisms. The fear of the unknown becomes stronger than the desire to grow, and as a result, life stays the same year after year. When people live unconsciously, time begins to slip through their fingers. Days blend into weeks, months into years, and life becomes a cycle of repetition. Wake up, work, worry, sleep, repeat. There is no deep presence, no intentional living, no true experience of the moment. Every moment is overshadowed by thoughts about what happened before or what might happen next. The present is sacrificed for the past and the future. And because of this, people feel as if life is moving too fast, or as if they are not truly living it, they are simply watching it pass by. Another sign of unconscious living is how easily people are influenced by others. Opinions, judgments, expectations, and social pressure control their actions. Instead of listening to their inner voice, they listen to the noise around them. They compare themselves constantly, seek validation, and measure their worth using external standards. This creates emotional exhaustion and a constant feeling of not being enough. And because they are unaware of this pattern, they keep returning to the same emotional struggles. Perhaps the most painful aspect of unconscious living is that it prevents people from seeing who they really are. They identify themselves with thoughts, emotions, achievements, failures, roles, and labels. They forget that these things are temporary. They forget that their true nature is deeper than the activity of the mind. Without awareness, they mistake their mental patterns for their identity, and this creates a life filled with confusion and inner conflict. In this state, life feels like survival instead of creation. Decisions are reactions. Dreams are suppressed. Potential remains untouched. The beauty of life stays hidden behind layers of mental noise. And the person moves forward without truly choosing their direction, carried by the momentum of old habits, old fears, and old beliefs. This is what it means to live unconsciously, to allow the mind to take the wheel while the true self sits quietly in the back seat, waiting for the moment when awareness returns. An undisciplined mind becomes one of the greatest obstacles to personal growth, because it operates without direction, without clarity, and without understanding. It behaves like a wild force acting on impulses, emotions, and fears. When the mind is not trained, it does not serve you, it controls you. It convinces you to avoid anything uncomfortable, and in doing so, it prevents you from ever discovering your true capabilities. Growth requires discomfort, challenge, and discipline, but the untrained mind resists all three with incredible strength. The mind's natural tendency is to seek pleasure and avoid pain. At first, this seems helpful, but over time it becomes one of the biggest limitations. Every meaningful transformation begins with discomfort. Waking up early, exercising, learning a skill, facing challenges, admitting mistakes, taking risks. But the undisciplined mind whispers, "Not now, maybe later. This is too hard, you're not ready." These thoughts feel convincing because the mind presents them as reasonable concerns, but in reality, they are protective mechanisms that keep you from stepping into your potential. The mind is not trying to help you grow. It is trying to help you stay comfortable, and comfort is the enemy of growth. When a mind lacks discipline, it becomes chaotic. It jumps from thought to thought without purpose, creating noise instead of clarity. Overthinking becomes constant. Small issues become large. Simple tasks feel overwhelming. The mind imagines problems that do not exist, creating stress out of situations that have no real danger. A single negative thought becomes a spiral of worry. Instead of guiding you forward, the mind becomes a storm that pulls you backward. In this state, even when opportunities come your way, you hesitate, because the mind amplifies fear louder than possibility. One of the most destructive effects of an untrained mind is its ability to magnify emotions. Without discipline, emotions rule every decision. Anger makes you react impulsively. Fear makes you avoid responsibility. Sadness stops you from trying. Doubt destroys your confidence before you begin. The mind becomes like a wave that rises and falls, constantly shifting your emotional state. You become reactive, unstable, and easily influenced by whatever is happening around you. Life becomes a series of emotional highs and lows, instead of a steady path guided by intention. An undisciplined mind also wastes enormous amounts of energy. Instead of focusing on what matters, it becomes easily distracted. It looks for temporary pleasure instead of long-term success. It jumps from task to task without finishing anything. It spends hours on meaningless activity, entertainment, gossip, scrolling, daydreaming, while the truly important goals are ignored. This constant distraction weakens the ability to concentrate. Without focus, even the most capable person fails to make progress. The mind becomes a maze of scattered intentions and unfinished efforts. Another dangerous characteristic of an untrained mind is its attachment to past pain and future fears. It replays old mistakes again and again, keeping you trapped in memories you should have let go long ago. It predicts negative outcomes before anything happens, robbing you of confidence and hope. When the mind is not disciplined, it lives everywhere except the present moment. And without presence, there can be no clarity, no peace, and no wisdom. The past drags you backward, the future pulls you forward, and you lose the only moment where you have real power, the present. The undisciplined mind also shapes identity in harmful ways. It convinces you that temporary emotions define who you are. I failed once, so I am a failure. I struggled today, so I am weak. Someone disrespected me, so I am worthless. Over time, these mental stories become beliefs, and those beliefs become the walls of your mental prison. You begin to act, live, and speak according to these limitations. And because the mind repeats them so often, they begin to feel like undeniable truth. Without discipline, even the strongest desires fade away. You may want success, but the mind chooses comfort. You may want growth, but the mind chooses familiarity. You may want peace, but the mind chooses conflict. You may want transformation, but the mind chooses excuses. And slowly, over months and years, the gap between who you are and who you could be becomes wider and wider. The untrained mind destroys dreams before they are born. It kills motivation before it becomes action. It shapes your life according to fear rather than purpose. It makes you reactive instead of deliberate. And because these patterns operate silently, people often blame the world for what their mind is doing to them. They say the world is against them, when in reality, it is their undisciplined inner world that stands in the way.
This is the true danger of a mind that is left untrained. It makes you a prisoner to your own thoughts, a victim of your own emotions, and a stranger to your own potential. Awareness is the first and most powerful doorway to inner mastery, because the moment you become aware of your thoughts, you separate yourself from them. Until that moment, the mind operates as if it owns you. It produces thoughts, and you absorb them. It generates emotions, and you react to them. It creates stories, and you believe them. But awareness introduces a profound shift suddenly. You are no longer submerged in your thoughts. You are watching them. You become the observer instead of the prisoner. This single shift is the foundation upon which every form of inner strength, peace, and clarity is built. Awareness means shining a light on the internal mechanisms that previously ran in the dark. Thoughts that once controlled you now reveal themselves as patterns. Emotions that once overwhelmed you become signals instead of storms. Reactions that once felt automatic begin to slow down. You start to realize that not everything the mind says is true. Not every thought deserves attention, and not every emotion requires action. Awareness breaks the illusion that the mind is your master. Instead, it shows you that you are the one who chooses how to respond. When awareness is absent, the mind is like a fast, moving river, and you are being swept away by the current. But when awareness arrives, it is as if you step onto the riverbank and simply watch the water flow. The river is still moving, thoughts continue to appear, emotions still arise, but you are no longer drowning in them. You observe without being pulled under. This is the beginning of freedom, understanding that thoughts are events, not commandments. Awareness allows you to question the origins of your thoughts instead of blindly accepting them. You start noticing how many thoughts come from fear, insecurity, old memories, social conditioning, or emotional wounds. You see how many thoughts repeat daily, like a script the mind has memorized. You recognize how many thoughts are based on assumptions rather than truth. This is a powerful realization because once you see the mind's patterns clearly, you no longer fall into them unconsciously. Awareness becomes the shield that protects you from your own inner distortions. Over time, the simple act of observing your thoughts brings calmness to the mind. The more you watch, the more the mind quiets itself. Why? Because awareness interrupts the automatic cycle of overthinking. The mind thrives on attention. When you stop feeding it emotional energy, it begins to lose its grip. Slowly, the noise decreases and clarity emerges. Awareness becomes like a light that dissolves the darkness of confusion, showing you what is real and what is imagined. Awareness also gives you the space between stimulus and response. Instead of reacting instantly, you pause. And in that pause lies wisdom. You notice your breath. You notice tension in your body. You notice the urge to react, but you don't act on it immediately. This pause allows you to choose your behavior consciously instead of letting the mind dictate it. Most conflicts, regrets, and emotional mistakes happen not because people are bad or weak, but because they lacked this moment of awareness before reacting. With awareness, even painful experiences transform. Instead of being consumed by anger, you observe that anger is arising within you. Instead of drowning in sadness, you recognize sadness as an emotion moving through you. Instead of being paralyzed by fear, you see fear as an old survival mechanism triggered by the mind. This perspective doesn't eliminate the emotion instantly, but it prevents the emotion from controlling your identity. You no longer say, "I am angry" or "I am afraid." Instead, you say,
Anger is present, fear is present. The difference is profound. You go from being the emotion to being the witness of the emotion. Awareness also awakens a deeper intelligence, one that lies beyond the mind's constant chatter. When the mind quiets, intuition arises, creativity flows, clarity appears, wisdom emerges. You begin to understand situations with depth instead of judgment. You see possibilities that fear had been blocking. You recognize truths that were hidden beneath layers of mental noise. Life begins to feel guided not by anxiety, but by inner knowing. As awareness strengthens, you become more present. You start to experience life directly instead of through the filter of thoughts. You notice the details you previously ignored, the rhythm of your breath, the sensations in your body, the beauty around you, the peace within you. You begin to realize that the present moment holds everything you truly need. The mind constantly drags you into the past or pushes you into the future, but awareness anchors you in the now, where life actually unfolds. Awareness also helps you take responsibility for your internal state. You stop blaming the world, circumstances, or people for how you feel. You recognize that while you cannot control everything outside you, you can absolutely control how you relate to your inner experience. The moment you understand this, your power returns. You are no longer helpless or reactive. You become deliberate, intentional, and grounded. Ultimately, awareness shows you the truth. You are not your thoughts. You are the one who sees them. You are not your emotions. You are the one who feels them. You are not your fears. You are the consciousness behind them. This recognition marks the beginning of true mastery, a mastery not over the world, but over yourself. Training the mind is one of the most powerful transformations a human being can undergo, because a trained mind becomes a source of strength, clarity, peace, and direction. When the mind is mastered, it no longer behaves like a restless animal pulling you in every direction. Instead, it becomes a disciplined companion that supports your growth rather than sabotaging it. Most people believe that life must change first in order for them to feel better. But in truth, the moment the mind changes, life changes automatically. The external world reflects the inner world. When the mind is calm, focused, and disciplined, everything else naturally falls into alignment. A trained mind understands purpose. It stops chasing every fleeting desire or distraction. It stops reacting impulsively to every emotion. It becomes still enough to recognize what truly matters and strong enough to stay committed to it. When your mind is trained, your decisions are no longer guided by fear, doubt, or impatience. You begin choosing actions that align with your values and long-term vision. This creates consistency, which leads to progress, and progress leads to confidence. Confidence then fuels further growth, creating a positive cycle that builds a powerful, steady momentum in life. When the mind is trained, it becomes resistant to the emotional storms that once controlled you. A disciplined mind does not collapse under pressure. It does not panic at uncertainty. It does not break at the first sign of difficulty. Instead, it observes challenges with clarity and responds with wisdom. Pain is still felt, but it no longer becomes suffering. Stress may appear, but it no longer dominates. Fear may arise, but it no longer dictates choices. This emotional resilience is one of the greatest gifts of a trained mind, because it allows you to remain steady even when life becomes turbulent. A trained mind also gains control over focus. In a world filled with endless distractions, focus is a superpower. The untrained mind jumps from idea to idea, task to task, emotion to emotion. but the trained mind cuts through the noise. It can place full attention on one thing, complete it, and move to the next with intention. This ability to direct attention at will is what separates successful people from those who struggle. Focus creates mastery, mastery creates excellence, excellence creates opportunities, and all of it begins with a mind that is disciplined enough to remain engaged instead of scattered. When the mind is trained, it begins to filter thoughts in a healthier way. You no longer believe every negative thought that arises. You question illusions, challenge fears, and dismiss thoughts that do not serve your growth. The mind becomes like a guardian, allowing only useful, empowering, and truthful thoughts to influence your actions. This mental filtering system prevents unnecessary suffering and builds inner strength. Instead of being a victim of your thoughts, you become the architect of your inner environment. Training the mind also develops inner silence. This silence is not empty. It is peaceful, steady, and deeply intelligent. In silence, solutions appear effortlessly. Creativity flows naturally. Intuition becomes louder than doubt. The trained mind rests in this silence, not because the world is quiet, but because the inner world is no longer in chaos. This inner stillness becomes a refuge, a place you can return to anytime for clarity and grounding. It becomes a sanctuary that external circumstances cannot disturb. Another powerful effect of a trained mind is the ability to break old patterns. Without discipline, people become prisoners of routines. They unconsciously inherited habits of procrastination, self-doubt, emotional reactions, and limiting beliefs. But when awareness joins discipline, these patterns begin to dissolve. You start choosing new behaviors, new responses, new habits that elevate your life instead of repeating the past. Slowly, the trained mind rewires itself, creating pathways that support growth rather than repeating cycles of suffering. A trained mind also strengthens self-control. You begin to act from intention instead of impulse. You say no to distractions, no to temptations, no to unhealthy behaviors. You say yes to discipline, yes to responsibility, yes to growth. You start doing what needs to be done even when you don't feel like it. This is the foundation of character. This is how powerful identities are built, not through motivation, but through disciplined choices made consistently over time. Another profound transformation that comes from training the mind is the shift in how you perceive difficulties. Instead of seeing challenges as obstacles to avoid, the trained mind sees them as opportunities for growth. Struggle becomes a teacher, failure becomes data, discomfort becomes a sign of progress, difficulties become stepping stones instead of barriers. This mental shift changes the entire direction of your life because you no longer fear adversity, you use it. A trained mind also awakens gratitude. When the mind is disciplined, it stops obsessing over what is missing and starts seeing what is already present. It stops comparing and starts appreciating. This naturally increases joy and decreases suffering. Gratitude brings contentment without destroying ambition. It makes life feel lighter, even when responsibilities are heavy. Ultimately, when the mind is trained, you become the creator of your life rather than the product of your circumstances. You choose your direction consciously. You shape your emotional world intentionally. You cultivate inner strength deliberately. The trained mind becomes your greatest ally, a guide that leads you toward clarity, purpose, peace, and fulfillment. And once your mind becomes your ally, there is nothing in life you cannot transform.